Thank you so very much for your kind invitation for me to join this wonderful event. I hope next year I can be there in person, as we go through these unusual times. So let me share my screen. We'll start at the beginning. So I'm very pleased to present today on one of my favorite topics and also expressions. So I call RegTech the secret sauce for financial institutions, fintechs, and virtual asset service providers. And I hope I love that I'm following both the esteemed speakers, because then we can I will actually tap upon some of what has been spoken about. So very briefly, by way of background, I'm trained as a lawyer, originally in Australia, then in New York and Silicon Valley, doing .com IPOs and M&A. And then I got recruited to join Credit Suisse here in Hong Kong, where I covered the region. And after that, I left to go into startup land, focusing on FinTech, RegTech, and LawTech. And so most recently, I now wear the professor hat. So I was recruited by Hong Kong U to lead a new initiative. I call it LITE Lab, so Law, Innovation, Technology, Entrepreneurship. In some ways, melding technology, regulation, and innovation into one. Now, this presentation is originally a longer version, and I would normally give time to the audience to respond, but in this version of 20 minutes, I'll go faster, so please excuse me. So this number is the number the UN Office of Drugs and Crime says that represents the amount of transnational crime in 2011. This is the number that represents the amount of money laundering that exists in the world at that same period. And this is the number of the amount that's actually captured and stopped. So this is the amount of fines after 10 years after the financial crisis that the global banks were subject to. So as you will recall, lots of misactivities that had led to these tremendous fines across the world. And this is the amount of money that is being spent, as estimated by Bain, by banks on general, just for global, for governance, risk, and compliance related matters. So this economists in 2018 estimated that at Citibank, 15% of the bank comprised of compliance folk. I don't know what that number is in Taiwan. I'd be really keen to know. And this is the number that the UK estimates that banks spend alone just for anti-money laundering activities, for banks to stop it, right? And a lot of that is headcount. So this is the number that Thomson Reuters identified in terms of the number of regulatory updates. So 56,000 regulatory updates in a year, coming from 900 different sources, which means every day there are 216 new regulatory updates the compliance officer has to follow. And this is the amount that WePro has estimated that 70 billion is the amount that banks spend on bank regulatory reporting. Overall, the IT spend of the banks, and 10 to 15% are just on regulatory reporting. So that's how much banks have to spend just to report under the different regulations. So it's really timely that we join after on FIDO, because one of the pure low use cases is really on AML and KYC. So traditionally, lots of paper, and the compliance officers to check different databases to actually solve the problem. Now with COVID, that has accelerated that, and so now again, solutions like on FIDO talk about online onboarding, right? Remote onboarding of clients through optical recognition, through biometrics. And then you have very sophisticated data analytics and AI that tap and with nice user interfaces and dashboards that help the compliance officer provide those services. In Hong Kong, these numbers represent part of the new face of finance. HKMA has now granted 8 virtual banks, of which the majority of them have launched now. There was a delay because of COVID, but they've now launched. So they're all purely online banks, no branches. Insurance Authority has granted 4 InsurTech or virtual insurance company licenses, and SFC has granted 1 in principle virtual trading platform kind of license. So if you think about it, my background was IPOs, and we're doing Ant Financial's IPO shortly, right? So now imagine doing trading for crypto, for virtual assets, purely on these regulated exchanges as opposed to unregulated exchanges. So 15 is the number of recommendations that the Financial Action Task Force had introduced. Because as we all know, especially in this space, we're very concerned about crypto and digital assets and ensuring that that's legalized. But now with the concept of the virtual asset service provider, there is a way forward for a lot of this to be regulated and legalized. And so if you follow the news, so there are technologies on the RegTech side to track some of this. And if you follow the news the last few weeks, PayPal has announced that they are now allowing for trading and selling of crypto. And there was a leaked news just in the last couple of days of DBS launching a digital asset exchange. So this is now very much coming mainstream. And so, of course, we need RegTech to look into that. So Nick Cook, the director of innovation, actually called RegTech the sleeping giant of the financial services world. That really allows for innovations and growth in that space. And ASIC has an even more innovative kind of approach. They have said, if not, why not? So they actually put the onus on the banks, and I think this is around the time of the Westpac scandal. But the onus on the bank is like, if there's latest technology, why aren't you using it? Right. So rather than so the onus have shifted in some major regulators around the world. The HKMA themselves are being very progressive as well, and they've launched a new initiative whereby there is a lead person that in charge of SupTech and RegTech in Hong Kong, and I was part of the initiative that helped the HKMA launch the CFT AML RegTech Forum, where all 200 plus licensed authorized institutions were invited to learn more and to share in relation to RegTech. And I met quite a few Taiwanese banks there, by the way. But it's not all roses. There are complications with these new technologies. It's a very unfortunate acronym, but FAT stands for Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency. So as we're using more AI and machine learning, how do we ensure that the algorithms are not unfairly, unconsciously discriminating? How are we making sure that the algorithms are not creating market risk? And so, for example, just on Monday, IOSCO consultation on AI in finance just closed, and we drafted a submission for that as well. So global regulators are actually increasingly focused on this issue. This is the number that Capital One quoted in terms of the number of people that were impacted by cybersecurity breaches, right? So the more that goes online, as was said early on, the more concern there is in relation to cybersecurity. So increasingly, we're seeing kind of digital identity as RegTech, and again, Onfido is a good example of that. As we think about how we identify folks, and in other contexts, I've talked about this for contact tracing because of COVID. So how do you identify yourself online? So one model that's been put across that Mizugawa has mentioned as well was kind of a KYC utility model, whereby you have why does each bank do separate KYC? Why can't we just have one central entity? And to be honest, the technology is there. It's just whether there's the will of the ecosystem and the players to do that. And there is a concern about it being a honeypot for cybersecurity hacks. So there are other more innovative kind of models being put forward, like sovereign self-identity models, where instead of a centralized identity, it's all decentralized using blockchain or distributed ledger technology to ensure the identity of individuals are being controlled by those individuals. So again, in that space, there's lots of technologies that can make this very interesting. Yet, the RegTech Association of Australia has highlighted that, for traditional RegTechs to be accepted into a lot of financial institutions, it can take 12 months to 2 years for the procurement cycle to get, for it to go through procurement. And I kind of call it the valley of death, right? So even if some RegTechs get proof of concepts, it may take that long, and some of them may not have the runway to actually survive that long. So actually, it is a significant concern. So I love Ms. Ogawa's slides about the ecosystem, because to me it's about skill sets and mindsets, and I call RegTech a team sport. So RegTech as an enterprise solutions play is different from other enterprise solutions. Normally you just have to sell. The vendor just needs to sell to the counterparty. The customer says, does this fulfill what I wanted to do? Great. In RegTech, the first question normally the potential customer says is, well, what does the regulator think? So it's really so important to involve the regulator in this discussion, and hence the team sport. So as mentioned earlier on, I'm the co-chair of the RegTech committee, the FinTech Association. So we've done various activities for the past few years. We started off with a series that I called RegTech Live. And so our first one is on KYC AML, and you'll see, frankly, some of the competitors of Enfido there. So Ms. Gupta, I need to speak to you. We need you to come over to Hong Kong a little bit more to make your presence felt. And then we did a separate session on AI and how different banks can use different kind of AI tools for the different use cases. I also set up the APAC RegTech Network. So that connected the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and Malaysia as we shared information across. And to be honest, I love Ms. Ogawa's slides because I was actually at FinSum. So I was invited by Hito-san last year, and I presented it at FinSum. Again, what was said was so important. How do we learn across? Because most financial institutions don't just act in one jurisdiction. We act across, and the solutions and the problems and the criminals are international. So last year, I set up something called the World RegTech Summit. And this was our first year doing it. It was done in conjunction with the launch of the RegTech book. And we pulled together the different ecosystem players, whether it's the buy side and the sell side, and then also the supply side together. And it was very well received. So this year we're doing it again. In fact, next week is Hong Kong FinTech Week. So we're just 1 week after the Taiwan one. And so we are organizing in World RegTech Summit. So if you're interested, we would love to have more, if there are Taiwanese RegTechs to come and showcase there. But more importantly, if you want to see some of what is happening in Hong Kong and across the globe, do come and join us as well. We really thank you so very much for the opportunity to share with you here. And I look forward to hearing your questions and sharing on the panel later on too. Thank you.